Now, we're a little behind in terms of time, so I'd ask for your full cooperation. I'm moving on, taking leaders' questions under Standing Order 36. I have to Mary Lou McDonald.
Minister, last night Sinn Féin brought forward a motion calling on government to introduce an emergency budget to ease the enormous pressure on struggling households. And I impressed upon the Taoiseach yesterday, or at least I tried, to demonstrate how this crisis is worsening for so many. But last night, even though families across the country are at breaking point, government ministers, one after the other, stood up in this chamber and opposed an emergency budget. I listened to your partner, your political twin, Paschal Donoghue, on radio this morning. He says that he appreciates the challenge households face, and in the next breath, he says that he isn't going to do anything about it. So tonight, it seems, ministers and members of the government benches will line up and vote against the introduction of measures to help families and workers. So the message from government to households on the brink is strap yourselves in because you are on your own. We've only 3 weeks left in the Dáil term, and then government will clock off for the summer, and you will walk away telling people to wait for budget 2023. Why? Because you don't have a plan in the here and now. Minister, October is too late for so many families. There are people watching in today who are literally only one bill away from going over the edge, one rent payment away from going under, people who work very long hours and who can't afford the basics. And this is the hard reality of people's lives. And despite everything that you might say, Minister, clearly your government doesn't get it. In fact, it is incredible to hear the government congratulate itself over and over for having done so much when clearly so much more needs to be done. Minister, children, as you know, head back to school in late August, early September, not October. And those families face astronomical costs now. Energy companies aren't going to give customers a break between now and October. Rip-off electricity bills will keep coming through the summer months. People go to fill their cars every week between now and October. And by the way, they're paying more than €2 a litre today. This is all happening now, Minister. So asking people to wait until October for help is asking them to wait for disaster. An emergency budget is a sensible and necessary response at this time. Action to cut rents, emergency cash payments for low and middle income earners, increases in social welfare rates to protect the most vulnerable. These are reasonable, necessary measures, and yet the Taoiseach and Minister Donoghue tell us they're not returning. I think this demonstrates very, very dramatically the priorities of this government, because I suspect, as many others do, that if it was those at the top who needed a bailout, Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael would be in like a flash. In fact, you've demonstrated before that when it's those at the top, you're in like a flash. But when it's ordinary people who need a bailout package, your message is tough luck. Tá sé do glatha go vótáiltí an rialtas an ag buis sé ag an dála anach, tastíon cúnamh ó Guine a níis a ara, beg sé tubaistach dóibh, irí orthú fannacht ceithre mí. Tonight's vote, then, is a test for every TD in this House who see their constituents suffering. You can either vote for them or you can vote against them. It is actually as plain and as simple as that. So, Minister, this is a state of emergency for households. They need an emergency budget now.
Thank you very much, Deputy McDonald. And we in government accept that a lot of people are under pressure and a lot of businesses are under pressure. We represent ordinary people too. We are elected by ordinary people. We meet them every day in our day-to-day lives as well. The reality is the inflation that is being experienced is at a 40-year high, and it is primarily driven by international factors. I think you too accept that. It is exceptional in nature. And that is why we have brought in a series of exceptional measures outside of the normal budgetary cycle, because we accept these are not normal times and a normal approach is not justified. We have to continue to fund a number of the measures that we've already introduced, including the reduction in excise on fuel, petrol and diesel, and indeed reduction in VAT on gas and electricity as well. Next week we will publish the summer economic statement, and we will also at that point have the mid-year exchequer position, and that will help to provide clarity on the resources that are available to the government, to the country, in the context of Budget 2023. It is quite possibly the case that as a country we may face a prolonged period of high inflation. We think it will peak in the short number of months ahead, but we cannot be certain of that. Monetary policy is changing internationally as well, and the global economic outlook is deteriorating. So we need to use the limited resources that we have wisely, and we have to time our further interventions to have maximum impact. And it is our view that people will most need further help come the autumn and into the winter period. And we will need, at that time, a set of measures that can have an impact quickly, and that will in particular be targeted at those who most need the help in respect of one-off measures, temporary measures and so on. And in the budget we will also need to see, building on measures we've already taken across a range of areas, how we can further address the day-to-day costs that people are facing, whether it be in childcare, in transport, in education and in health. And we have made moves and made significant investments in a number of those areas. And of course there will be a need for a significant welfare package, as well as providing a reduction in tax by way of ensuring that people do not continue to climb up into the higher rate of tax as they receive an income increase. In addition, we will have to invest in housing, we will have to invest in healthcare, in education and disability services. We've just listened to the debate there. We need to fund the MICA scheme. We need to make sure we have the resources for the Mother and Baby Homes Payment Scheme, and of course the cost of supporting the refugees who are coming to our country after fleeing war. So there will be a lot of demands on taxpayers' money, and of course you will be calling for more to be done on all of those issues over the months ahead. The good news is that Ireland is in a relatively strong position going into this period. Unemployment now is less than 5%. We have labour shortages across a whole range of sectors in the economy. We do have a broadly balanced budget. We've one of the fastest growing economies in the European Union, and we are continuing to win a large share of international investments. So we do have some capacity, but we have that capacity because we have managed the public finances well, and the economy has rebounded very significantly. So next week is an important milestone in the budgetary process. Minister Donoghue and I will engage with the Oireachtas. We'll appear before the Budgetary Oversight Committee to discuss with your colleagues the choices that we face as a country. But I'm sure the irony is not lost on you, that if we had followed your approach, if we had taken your advice to spend £3.5 billion more in the last budget, if we had taken your advice to do more every time we made an intervention in the last number of months, we wouldn't have the headroom and the capacity that you now call on us to use in order to do more. So we have to try and meet all of these competing demands. There will be a significant intervention in the autumn by the government, and it will be focused on the cost of living.
So, Minister, the good news is even better than you allude to, because actually not alone are we in a relatively strong position as you brag as an economy, but in fact it's projected that you'll take in 5.6 billion more in tax revenues than projected on budget day. You talked about clarity. Let me just give you clarity as you brag about the economic position and how well you have managed the public finances. As we meet today, in households across this country, getting a child back to school in September is now a household crisis. How's that, Minister? That's the facts on the ground. School book lists started to arrive today into many households. And those families who work very, very hard, for them the outlook is not relatively positive. In fact, for many of them it's terrifying. And I am saying to you very simply, in your position as a minister of this government, how will you respond now? How will you react now? How will you support those families now, not in October? That's the net point. Minister, if I might say, last Concordia, it's very galling to hear on the one hand the bragging for government of what a wonderful job you're doing, how wonderfully rosy the economic outlook is, while families suffer. So you sit in your hands, Nero fiddles and Rome burns.
Please, Minister, thank you.
Thank you, Lasca and Corlett. There's nobody bragging, Deputy, and there's no need to drag down the tone of the political debate on what is a really important issue that affects ordinary people and ordinary businesses all over the country. I can legitimately make the point that if we had followed your advice, spent £3.5 billion more in the budget last year on expenditure, and spent more every time we made an intervention earlier this year, when you said it only scratched the surface, anyone looking at your website will see all of the promises and commitments that you're making that add up to billions of euro. Those are the releases that are not yet deleted from your website. Then I'm legitimately able to make the case that we do have the resources to do more as a government because the public finances are in a reasonably strong position. We've already made interventions. I've given a commitment that we are prepared to go further. It is our assessment that the best time to do that is in the autumn. If we came into the House now with a package, first of all you'd say it wasn't enough, and then it would mean we have less money to make a difference in the autumn when we think people will need it most. We understand the pressures that people are facing, and the government is committed to a budget that is focused on cost of living, as well as measures in the autumn that will have as close to an immediate impact as we can practically deliver.
Thank you, Minister.